Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan. If you're new to the channel, welcome to Words in Time. If you're already subscribed, then welcome back. Now, today I'm going to be reviewing classic sci-fi, a sci-fi classic, if you will. It is The Mote in God's Eye by Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle. Now, off the bat, I want to say, I think it's kind of interesting that this book is co-written by two authors. That's not unheard of, but I think it is rather interesting. When reading it, I didn't notice a strong difference or any sort of disjointedness or clear differentiation between when one writer was writing or the other. So I thought that was interesting that it felt very much like a cohesive piece of artwork. I haven't actually read anything by either of these two authors before, so perhaps if I had, maybe I'd read Ringworld by Larry Niven, which I know is quite popular. Perhaps I might have been able to pinpoint perhaps particular turns of phrase or certain styles or ideas that might come from one or the other. But yeah, I just thought that was just a little interesting quirk about this book to get started. So, what is this book about? Well, the premise is that we are about 1,000 years in the future and humans are able to travel between stars. And on their journey, they come across another life form. Don't worry, this is not too much of a spoiler. This is in the blurb. We meet the aliens about 50 pages in. So don't worry, I'm not giving too much away. But yes, this is a first contact story, and it is all about, are these aliens friendly? Are they dangerous? What do we learn about them? How do we interact with them? And how does that play out within the world that these two writers have built for us? Now, quickly, I do just want to admit that I Googled how to pronounce the word mote. I have heard people refer to this book as the Mote in God's Eye, but I think those people can be forgiven because A, mote is not an overly common word, and B, the aliens in the book are referred to as motes, M-O-T-I-E-S. So that's probably a source of the confusion. A mote, there is essentially a giant star, a red star, and then a yellow star in front of that star, at least from a particular place in space. And so that star is referred to as the mote in God's eye. So the aliens that we meet are referred to as the motes. So the real strength of this book is the motes, the aliens. In terms of books introducing an alien species, I think this has to be one of the best in terms of providing rich culture, exploring hierarchies, language, what technologies that they have or don't have, and how that differs from the humans, or at least this human society in around 1,000 years into the future. I was very intrigued by the motes. Every little nugget that we got given made me more intrigued. I wanted to hear more about them. I wanted to decipher not only how they worked as a society, but how they were going to interact with the humans, whether we could trust them, and just like the characters in the book, make that decision for myself. Are the motes friend or foe? Now, the characters in this book, at least the human characters, I found a little bit less interesting than the motes. There's quite a few characters. I believe there's even a character list at the start of, the novel for you. Dramatis Personae. Not all of them are that differentiable, may or may not be a word, from each other. Probably the two main characters, the easiest to differentiate, are Commander Blaine and Sally. And I thought that they were somewhat rich characters. There was a little bit of depth there, enough to kind of get me invested in the outcome, but I wasn't in love with the characters. The exploration of space and aliens is much more in depth than the exploration of character. There are some other characters that are a little two-dimensional for me. A lot of them are essentially very anti-Mote, and a lot of them are very pro-Mote. So, not as strong as the Motes themselves, but that was my take on the characters. The writing is pretty solid. For a book written in the 70s, I thought it was fairly readable by modern day standards. There's a little bit of hard sci-fi in here, but I found that quite easy to digest. I thought the prose was fairly simple, fairly standard, although there were nice touches, nice moments, flourishes of a bit of character there. So overall, I found this quite an enjoyable read, just purely based on the writing. However, there is an element that often comes up when talking about this book, and that is it is rather dated in a number of respects. So some of the languages that it uses is definitely not politically correct. I wouldn't say it's frequent, but there's a couple of noticeable moments, and I think it'll be up to you to decide the author's intent, whether they are trying to convey that the person saying them, so the character using that language is not exactly a great person, or whether the authors thought it was okay to say these things. I can't say for sure. I can't say what the authors intended. Initially, when I was reading it, I just thought that those were bad characters, but obviously, that's based on a 2021 perspective. The culture that is created for 1,000 years into the future, I think around 3017 is the year, is quite rich in terms of history. I think they do a good job of not hitting you over the head with the history. They kind of weave it through the narrative, which I really enjoyed. But it is the culture, the human culture is quite reserved, particularly in terms of social issues, intimacy, relationships. And I don't think that's necessarily an inherently good or bad thing. I just think that for a book that is set in the year 3017, the fact that it feels like 1950 is just maybe not that exciting or interesting to me. I'm not saying it's necessarily a good or bad thing, but my personal choice was like, okay, I get what they're going for. It's not something that's particularly new or engaging to me, but that's what they chose to go with, and it does affect certain characters and plot points within the book. Now, definitely not going to tell you how it ends, but just my feeling on the ending itself. I thought that this book had a real pace going for it around 300 pages into the book. If we just do a quick flick through, we're looking at around 550 or so. But in the last roughly 200 pages, I felt like it slowed a little when I wanted the story to ramp up. Physical representation of a ramp there. I felt like it actually slowed down, and all of the things that were the best parts about the book, learning more about the Motes, I kind of feel like they given nearly all of it to us. There's no massive reveal, in my opinion, about the Motes. I think the meat of what you're going to get is going to come in the first 2/3 of the book, and that's okay. I thought the ending was logical. I thought it sort of tied things together. It wasn't completely unsatisfactory, but it didn't really build to an explosive conclusion. So, putting that all together, I think this is a flawed book. I think it is a book, however, that does have quite high points. And so with those two in mind, I'm going to give The Mote in God's Eye a 7 out of 10. Pretty strong score. I think if you're into sci-fi, if you're into relatively hard sci-fi, and if you're into first contact stories, aliens, there's going to be a lot to enjoy in this book. So if that sounds good to you, definitely pick it up. If some of the other things that I mentioned sound perhaps like deal breakers, it might not be for you, but I'll let you make that choice. But pretty solid read, and I can see why it's a classic. So I hope you enjoyed the review, guys. If you haven't read the book, let me know whether you're interested in picking it up. And if you have, get in the comments and let me know what you felt about it. Until then, guys, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for another sci-fi review coming soon.